It started like any other Saturday morning. I'd just finished mowing the lawn, the sun was beating down but not unbearably, and I was looking forward to kicking back with a cold drink and enjoying a peaceful afternoon. That peace shattered the moment I rounded the corner of my driveway and saw my truck. At first, I thought maybe it was just a trick of the light, shadows dancing across the deep blue paint of my pride and joy, a Ford F-150 I'd spent years customizing. But as I got closer, my stomach dropped. The entire driver's side was a jagged mess of scratches, deep, deliberate gouges that ran from the front fender all the way to the tailgate. Someone had taken a key, or something sharper, and carved their rage into my truck like it was a canvas. I stood frozen for a few seconds, heart pounding, thoughts racing. My hands trembled as I touched one of the fresh scratches. The paint curled slightly at the edges, and I could see flecks of white where the metal had been exposed. This wasn't just vandalism. This was personal. The worst part? I already had a gut feeling about who did it. Karen. Karen lived 3 doors down in our tight-knit HOA neighborhood, if you could call it tight-knit. She was the self-appointed queen of our cul-de-sac. Always watching. Always reporting. Always starting drama over the tiniest things. She had previously complained about my truck being too loud, too big, and once claimed it was ruining the aesthetic harmony of the street. I brushed her off every time. But now, this crossed a line. I walked back inside, trying to breathe, trying not to blow a fuse. My wife, Sarah, was in the kitchen prepping lunch and immediately noticed something was off. "What's wrong?" she asked, drying her hands on a towel. "Someone keyed the truck," I said through gritted teeth. Her eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. It's bad. Like, thousands in damages bad." She followed me outside, and when she saw it, she gasped. "Oh my God. Who would do this?" "I have a pretty good idea." "You think it was Karen?" "I know it was Karen. But knowing and proving are 2 different things. I wasn't going to just storm down the street and accuse her without evidence. That's what she would do, act on entitlement and zero proof. No, I was going to play this smart. First thing I did was call the police and file a report. An officer came out about an hour later, took photos, jotted notes, and asked the standard questions. I told him about Karen's past complaints, about the HOA disputes, about the times she snapped pictures of my truck like she was building a case against me. "Do you have any cameras?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not on that side. But the neighbors across the street do. They've got one that faces the street directly." "That's a good place to start," he said. I headed next door to Mr. Ramirez's place. He was in his mid-60s, quiet, friendly, and always working on some project in his garage. When I explained what happened and asked about his camera, he didn't even hesitate. "I'll pull the footage for you," he said. "If someone did that to your truck, they deserve to get caught." 15 minutes later, we were watching grainy footage on his tablet. And there she was, Karen. Clear as day. 9:17 p.m. the night before. Dressed in her signature leopard print robe and fluffy slippers. She casually walked up the street with her little yappy dog, paused in front of my driveway, looked around, and then reached into her pocket. With one swift motion, she dragged something sharp across the side of my truck. Not once. Not twice. 3 separate strokes. She glanced around again, gave the truck a smug look, and continued walking like nothing happened. I blinked in disbelief. I was furious, yes, but also almost impressed by the sheer audacity of it. She didn't even try to disguise herself. No hood. No hat. No hesitation. Like she thought she'd never get caught. "Mind if I make a copy of that?" I asked Ramirez. "Already send it to your phone," he said with a grin. I thanked him and headed back home. The officer was still there, and when I showed him the video, he raised an eyebrow and gave a low whistle. "Well, that's about as solid as it gets," he said. "You want to press charges?" "I do," I said immediately. He nodded. "All right. I'll file the report and let the detectives follow up. This'll go on record." But even after the officer left, something still gnawed at me. Karen wasn't going to be truly sorry. She'd deny it, deflect, or pretend it was no big deal. She'd lawyer up, twist the story, maybe even try to get me fined by the HOA for some nonsense violation. No, a legal report wasn't enough. I needed to make a point. I needed everyone in the neighborhood to see what she really was. And that's when the idea started forming. I sat in my garage, staring at the scratched truck, fuming. My toolbox was nearby. I had paint, brushes, stencils, even a projector. I'm no artist, but I'd done custom lettering before, on signs, mailboxes, even some garage art. Karen had already confessed, in her actions. Maybe it was time to make that confession permanent. On something she couldn't ignore. Like the pristine white Lexus SUV she was so proud of. I didn't act right away. I wanted to make sure the next move was perfect, both calculated and poetic. I wasn't just going to vandalize her car. I was going to put the truth on display, loud and clear, using her own words, captured from the footage, and paint them where the whole neighborhood could read them. Because sometimes, justice needs a little creativity. And Karen? She was about to become the centerpiece of it. The next morning, the sun rose on what looked like a normal, peaceful neighborhood, but everything had changed. I had proof. Solid, indisputable proof. And not just a blurry shadow or vague shape. You could see Karen's smug face, her fluffy dog, her bathrobe with that hideous cheetah print. It was her. She keyed my truck like she was brushing her teeth. No hesitation. No guilt. But here's the thing, in an HOA community like ours, people like Karen don't go down easily. They don't apologize. They don't admit fault. They double down. They threaten. They twist the narrative. So before I made my next move, I had to make sure every detail was tight. No loose ends. No room for her to manipulate the story. I spent part of that Sunday making backup copies of the security footage. I uploaded it to 3 separate cloud drives, saved it on a USB, and even burned it to a DVD. Just in case. I wasn't about to have Karen cry, deepfake, or claim I forged the footage. I also went through my texts and emails, saving every HOA message where she complained about my truck. There were 6. 6 petty complaints in just the last 4 months. Each more ridiculous than the last. One of them literally said, "It's embarrassing to have a truck that large parked in our neighborhood. It's disruptive, ugly, and inappropriate for our image." Signed, of course, Karen L. Newman, president of the HOA Landscaping and Visual Aesthetic Subcommittee. Who the hell writes like that? A visual aesthetic subcommittee? The police officer from the day before called back around noon. Said the report had been escalated to the HOA enforcement team and the city property damage unit. "Looks like she's got a history," he added, almost amused. Not her first complaint, or her first incident. That got me thinking. What else had she done? So I paid a visit to my neighbor 2 houses down, Cynthia. She was in her 40s, single mom, real sweet, and had lived there even longer than I had. When I told her what happened, her jaw practically hit the floor. "She keyed your truck," she said, eyes wide. "Caught on camera. Oh, that woman has problems. You remember when I painted my mailbox green last year?" "Yeah." She filed a complaint. Said it clashed with the HOA's seasonal plant selection. Then a week later, someone smashed the mailbox with a brick. My eyes narrowed. "You think it was her?" Cynthia nodded slowly. "I've always thought it was her. But I never had proof." Well, I did now. And it sounded like I wasn't the only one Karen had targeted. I made it a point to talk to a few more neighbors throughout the day, Mr. Harris across the street, the newlyweds on the corner, even a guy named Joel who kept to himself but turned out to have quite a few HOA horror stories. Every conversation led to the same conclusion: Karen had built a little kingdom of fear and control. She used her role on the HOA to bully people, threaten them with fines, make up rules on the spot, and act like the entire street was her personal museum exhibit. And every time someone pushed back, something happened. A car got egged. A trash bin went missing. A fence mysteriously got knocked over. Nobody ever caught her. Until now. Later that evening, I got a visit from the HOA board. 3 members. They showed up at my door in full performative mode, clipboards, polos with the HOA logo, stern expressions like they were about to deliver a war crime verdict. "Mr. Langston," the taller one said, "we received a complaint yesterday regarding an altercation involving your vehicle." I smiled politely. "Oh, you mean the felony?" He blinked. "Excuse me? My truck got keyed. Deep scratches, thousands in damage. But I think what you really hear about is who did it." The shortest woman in the trio frowned. "We've had a neighbor suggest that. Karen. Right?" They exchanged glances. I didn't even let them finish. I stepped inside, grabbed my phone, and walked back out with the video already queued up. "I think you'll want to see this," I said. I held it out and let them watch. All 3 stared at the screen. Not one of them spoke. There she was. Karen. In all her leopard print glory. Keys in hand. Scraping down my truck like it was her morning cardio. By the time the video ended, the tall man cleared his throat awkwardly. "This is pretty serious." "Sure is," I replied. "And I've already filed a police report. Pressing charges. But I wanted to make sure the HOA sees it too, since she's been using your authority to bully half the block." The woman looked genuinely uncomfortable now. "We had no idea." "Well, now you do." They left pretty quickly after that, promising to launch an internal review, which basically meant they'd probably meet in a backyard with wine coolers and whisper about Karen behind her back. But it didn't matter. They had seen it. And I had witnesses. Still, I knew Karen would try to weasel out. Sure enough, later that night, my doorbell rang. It was her. No dog. No robe. Just her in full suburban warrior mode, lipstick too red, blouse too ironed, and that fake tight-lipped smile like she was about to sell me overpriced Tupperware. "Hi there," she said. "Can we talk?" "Sure," I said. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "About the truck?" She actually had the audacity to laugh. "Oh, you don't really believe that silly video, do you? I mean, the quality is just terrible. That could be anyone." I didn't flinch. "That anyone was wearing your robe, walking your dog." She smiled tighter. "You really think this is the route you want to take? Stirring up trouble in a peaceful neighborhood? You know, the HOA might fine you for those accusations." "You know," I said, "the police might fine you for property damage." She stepped closer. "I'd be careful if I were you." I leaned in just slightly. "You should be. Because I'm not done yet." I turned and walked inside, leaving her stunned on my porch. And as I shut the door, one thought ran through my mind. She still thought this was a battle of words. She had no idea what I was about to do next. The morning after Karen's little porch visit, I was still buzzing with adrenaline. I couldn't sleep much the night before, and when I did, I dreamed of dragging my keys across her car with the same smug satisfaction she'd shown in the security footage. But I wasn't going to sink to her level, not in the same way. I had a different kind of revenge in mind. Still, part of me wanted closure. I wanted to see if, by some miracle, Karen would admit what she did. Even if she didn't apologize, I thought maybe, just maybe, the video had rattled her enough to make her second-guess her behavior. After all, she couldn't deny what was in the footage. She was caught. Clear as day. So I decided to give her one last chance to do the right thing. I walked down to her house mid-morning, camera in my shirt pocket rolling, just in case she decided to throw another tantrum. Her front yard was immaculate, as always, artificial turf so green it looked radioactive, trimmed hedges shaped like spirals, and that giant stone fountain in the middle of her lawn that made it look more like a resort than a home. I knocked on the door. She answered almost immediately. This time, no robe. No smile. Her expression was unreadable, icy, calculating. "Yes? I want to talk," I said. "Face to face. No drama. Just honesty." She leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. "About what?" "You know exactly what," I said calmly. "The truck. The footage. Everything." She raised an eyebrow. "You mean the blurry video of a mystery woman who looks vaguely like me? Please. You keyed my truck, Karen. You were caught red-handed." She snorted. "Allegedly. It's not allegedly when half the street saw it already." She rolled her eyes, clearly getting annoyed. "Oh please. Do you think anyone around here cares? You're the loud one with the oversized ego mobile parked like it's a trophy. Everyone's sick of you acting like you own the block." "Really? Because the only complaints I've gotten came from you." She shrugged. "Then maybe I'm the only one with taste." That's when I knew. She wasn't just guilty, she was proud of it. "You've got problems," I said. "You act like this neighborhood is your kingdom, like we all live here to meet your standards." "It's not about standards," she said. "It's about order. And your truck? Your attitude? Your disorder. You don't fit here." I stared at her for a long moment. "You really think that gives you the right to destroy someone's property? You have no proof it was me," she said, voice slick with venom. "And even if you think you do, the HOA will never side with you. Not after the complaints I've submitted." That's when she laughed. A slow, sharp, mocking laugh that echoed off her fountain and into the street. "You're not going to win this," she said. "You think you're clever, but you're just another man with a big truck and a bigger temper. I've been on this board for 8 years. I've seen people like you come and go." I clenched my jaw. She wasn't just trying to cover her tracks, she was taunting me. She believed she was untouchable. That the system would protect her. That I would eventually give up, patch my truck, and let her walk away like nothing happened. I said nothing. I just turned around and walked away. Because that was all I needed to hear. I went back home and immediately reviewed the footage I had recorded during our exchange. Her tone, her words, her laughter, it was all there. It wasn't a confession, not exactly. But it was damning. She openly admitted she hated the truck, denied the obvious truth, and made it clear she believed she was above consequence. That was fine by me. Because now I had the motive, the history, the evidence, and the fuel. It was time to execute the real plan. I started by sketching out the design on paper. I wanted it big, bold, and impossible to ignore. I had an old projector I'd used for garage movie nights. I hooked that up, aimed it at a canvas in my garage, and practiced stenciling block letters across a car-sized shape. I ran through the plan a dozen times in my head. Timing. Materials. Message. The final phrase I chose was simple. I keyed my neighbor's truck, and I'd do it again. That's what I was going to paint, bright red letters, across the pristine white surface of her Lexus SUV. I wasn't just going to match her damage, I was going to make her live with it. But this wasn't about wrecking her car. I didn't want to stoop to pure vandalism. No, I was going to use washable, temporary automotive paint, the kind used for car advertising. It wouldn't damage the finish, but it would stay on long enough to make a statement. Long enough for every neighbor, every dog walker, every morning jogger to see what she'd done. And just in case she tried to play the victim afterward, I'd film the whole thing. That night, I waited. At 3:42 a.m., I slipped out of my garage in all black, paint canisters and stencils in hand. Karen's SUV was parked in her driveway. Of course, she never used the garage. Too full of HOA banners, I imagined. I worked quickly, efficiently, projecting the text onto the side of the Lexus and tracing each bold letter with the spray can. The red stood out vividly against the white surface, and with each spray, I felt the satisfaction build. By the time I finished the last letter, I stepped back and admired the work. I keyed my neighbor's truck, and I'd do it again. Simple. Devastating. True. I didn't key her car. I didn't slash her tires. I didn't lay a finger on it. But I gave her something worse. A mirror. And then, I went home, crawled into bed, and slept like a baby. By the time the sun rose, the neighborhood was buzzing. I made a pot of coffee, stepped outside in my robe, and pretended to be surprised when Karen's shrill scream tore through the peaceful morning air. Who did this? Who the hell did this to my car? Neighbors began trickling out, curious. Cameras came out. Whispers started. Karen ran out into the street, still barefoot, hair a mess, pointing at her own car like it had personally betrayed her. This is slander. This is illegal. I sipped my coffee, leaned on my porch post, and said calmly, well, if the writing fits. Her eyes met mine. She knew it was me. But the best part? She couldn't prove anything. Not this time. The morning chaos was even better than I'd imagined. By 7:15 a.m., Karen's driveway had turned into the neighborhood's main attraction. People who hadn't spoken to each other in months were now clustered in little huddles, sipping coffee and peeking through blinds. Dogs paused mid-walk as their owners stared, mouth slightly agape, at the massive red lettering sprawled across Karen's pearl-white Lexus SUV. I keyed my neighbor's truck, and I'd do it again. It stretched across both doors on the driver's side, bold and unavoidable. It didn't matter whether you drove by or walked down the street, you couldn't not see it. It was poetic, humiliating, and most importantly, true. Karen, however, wasn't focused on poetry. She was focused on screaming. I demand to know who did this. This is vandalism. This is a personal attack. She was pacing back and forth on her lawn, holding a phone in one hand and waving the other around like she was directing air traffic. Her SUV just sat there, glistening in the morning sun, now branded with her own guilt. I watched from my porch, mug in hand, nodding to a few neighbors who passed with smirks or raised eyebrows. Some even gave me thumbs up. Mrs. Reynolds from across the street whispered, it's about time someone gave her a taste of her own medicine. But Karen wasn't giving up. She was calling the police. I knew she would, because that's what people like her do. They play victim the moment they lose control. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, a squad car pulled up. A young officer got out and walked toward her driveway while Karen stormed toward him like she'd been personally summoned by royal decree. That car was vandalized, she shrieked. I want fingerprints. DNA tests. I want whoever did this arrested. The officer, who looked far too calm to deal with Karen before coffee, just glanced at the SUV and raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, he said, this looks like water-based paint. Not permanent. It doesn't matter. Look what it says. It's slander. Is it true? Karen's face flushed so red it matched the writing. Absolutely not. Because, he continued, if it's not true, it's slander. But if it is true, he let that hang in the air. Karen sputtered. I demand a report. I'm being targeted. The officer finally turned, took out his notepad, and sighed. Fine. Let's start from the beginning. Did anyone see or hear anything unusual? She immediately spun around and pointed directly at me. Him. The crowd of neighbors turned like a synchronized wave. I didn't flinch. I walked down from my porch slowly, still holding my coffee, and stood at the edge of her driveway. Morning, officer, I said with a nod. He nodded back. She says you may be involved. Oh, I'm sure she does. Karen's eyes narrowed. He had a motive. His truck was keyed just 2 days ago. He's been spreading lies. I took a slow sip. You mean the security footage? That's not a lie, Karen. That's evidence. The officer's head turned. Security footage? I have a full clip of her scratching my truck with her keys. Night before last. I already filed a report. I can send it to you right now. The officer blinked. Wait, so you have video proof that she keyed your truck? Crystal clear, I said. Even the dog's in it. Karen's jaw dropped. You can't just. That video is doctored. It's fake. I pulled out my phone. Want to see it, officer? He nodded. Yes, please. I hit play, and once again, Karen's late-night vandalism played out for an audience. The officer watched without speaking. Karen stood frozen, horror slowly replacing fury. When the video ended, he whistled softly. Well, that's compelling. Karen finally snapped. This is character assassination. He painted my car. The officer turned to me again. Did you paint her car? I smiled. I used washable auto paint. Didn't scratch it. Didn't damage it. I even stayed on the driveway. And I filmed myself the entire time, happy to provide that too. The officer looked torn between laughing and taking notes. So, this is more of a statement than a crime. Exactly, I said. A response. No harm done to her vehicle. She, on the other hand, keyed my truck and caused real damage. Over $3,000 in repair estimates. My insurance is already handling it. Karen was now trembling, eyes wide and darting between the officer and the crowd. She wasn't used to this. Not being believed. Not being in control. She had always operated from the shadows, making anonymous complaints, whispering lies, hiding behind the HOA's rules like they were shields. But this time? She was exposed. Humiliated. Publicly. And she had no idea what to do with that. Later that day, the paint was still on her SUV. I figured she'd rush to wash it off the moment the officer left, but nope, there it sat, out in the sun, a glowing red badge of shame. The best part? Every hour that passed, more neighbors came to see it. Some took photos. Others just stared and chuckled. Even Mr. Price, the quiet retired guy who never left his porch, said, about damn time someone did something about her. By evening, a note appeared on the HOA bulletin board. The HOA does not condone vandalism of any kind and will be investigating the matter internally. Residents are reminded to resolve disputes civilly. Karen Newman, HOA Subcommittee Chair. The audacity. She was trying to look like the bigger person, after she destroyed my truck. But the damage control wasn't working. My video was already circulating the neighborhood group chat. Word was spreading. Karen's castle was crumbling, and everyone could see the cracks. Even the board members were distancing themselves. I heard one of them quit the landscaping subcommittee that evening, said they didn't want to be associated with whatever madness she caused. That night, as I took the trash out, I saw Karen outside, scrubbing her SUV with a sponge and a bucket of soapy water. The paint came off, but the message lingered. Not in color. In reputation. Because every person who saw it would remember. And every person who knew the story would never forget. She didn't just key a truck. She got exposed. By her own actions, her own arrogance, and her refusal to ever admit she was wrong. And now? Her perfect little image was smeared in more than just paint. The paint may have washed off Karen's Lexus, but the stain on her reputation? That wasn't going anywhere. The next morning, I went about my business like nothing had happened. Coffee, paper, a walk with my dog. I waved at neighbors. They waved back, some with smirks, others with full-on grins. It was clear that the story had spread beyond our cul-de-sac. People a few blocks over were now walking past just to catch a glimpse of the infamous white SUV. It had become the neighborhood's new tourist attraction. Karen had tried to scrub off the words the night before, furiously working with a sponge and hose while muttering to herself. She got most of it off, though a faint red tint still lingered in the sun. But no amount of soap could erase what everyone had seen. What they knew. She keyed my truck. She got caught. And instead of apologizing or taking responsibility, she doubled down. That morning, I saw a small, desperate sign stuck to her mailbox in fancy script. Private property. No trespassing. No photos. No harassment. It might as well have said, please stop looking at me, I'm embarrassed. But it was too late. The HOA president, Mr. Gillespie, stopped by my place around lunchtime. He was a graying man in his late 50s, always trying to maintain a neutral stance in neighborhood disputes. He wore his usual windbreaker with the HOA crest embroidered over the heart. I won't take up much of your time, he said as I invited him onto the porch. Just wanted to follow up. On the truck? I asked, keeping my tone even. On the situation, yes. He adjusted his glasses and looked over at Karen's house. The footage has been reviewed. By multiple board members. Frankly, it's damning. We're drafting a formal complaint. Against her? He nodded. Yes. The HOA doesn't condone retaliatory or destructive behavior, regardless of personal feelings about someone's choice of vehicle. I smirked. Nice of you to say that now. He looked a little sheepish. Truth is, we've had issues with Karen before. Minor things. Passive-aggressive memos. Petty violations. But this is different. There's actual evidence. Police involvement. It's not something we can sweep under the rug. She keyed my truck. Thousands in damage. I saw the quotes, he said with a sigh. That's not minor vandalism, it's targeted property damage. And it has legal implications. I nodded. So what now? He paused for a moment before answering. We're voting on whether to remove her from her subcommittee roles. Possibly from the board entirely. About time. But, he added, she's threatening to sue. Claims the writing on her SUV was slanderous. It was her own confession, I said calmly. She said she keyed my truck and would do it again. I just made it visible. He chuckled. Honestly? Between you and me, genius move. I raised an eyebrow. So, what are you here for? Damage control? He shook his head. No. I'm here to tell you that a lot of us saw what happened, and we get it. She's bullied this community for years. People are fed up. You didn't damage her car. You didn't lie. You just told the truth, in a very public way. Glad to hear someone finally say that out loud. He stood up, brushing off his jacket. If it were up to me, I'd have her off the board today. But the vote's next week. Thought you should know. Appreciate it, I said. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and between us? That red paint? Looked better than anything the HOA ever approved for mailboxes. In the days that followed, the silence from Karen's house was deafening. She stopped going on her morning walks. No barking dog, no gossiping over the fence, no clipboard patrols around the block. Her blinds stayed closed, her fountain stopped running, and her pristine lawn started to yellow around the edges. Even her Lexus, which she used to park front and center in her driveway, was now hidden in her garage. The HOA meeting that weekend was packed. More than usual. People who hadn't shown up in months were now seated with folded arms and hushed whispers. The usual boring budget and maintenance topics were quickly pushed aside. Karen didn't show up. Instead, the board read a formal statement. After review of community video evidence, verified police reports, and multiple resident testimonies, the HOA finds that Karen Newman violated our neighborhood code of conduct and engaged in property destruction unbecoming of her position. She is hereby removed from all committee roles and suspended from future leadership positions indefinitely. A low murmur ran through the room. Some gasped. A few clapped. Mr. Gillespie banged his gavel softly and said, "Let's move forward." That was it. Years of Karen's rule ended with a single sentence. She tried to fight back, of course. She sent out a dramatic email blast claiming she was being defamed by a neighborhood mob, but by then, no one was listening. Screenshots of her message were passed around with laughing emojis. Her authority was gone. People started telling their own stories, stories I hadn't heard before. Cynthia talked about the time Karen threatened to fine her for having offensive wind chimes. Joel admitted that Karen once dug up his rose bushes because they were too bright. Even quiet Mr. Harris confessed that Karen tried to report him for having a non-regulation gnome on his porch. She had ruled through intimidation and fake rules. But now? Now the neighborhood knew. And she couldn't walk it back. As for my truck, I got it fixed. New paint, buffed panels, even a small upgrade to the rims. Insurance covered most of it, and I didn't mind the cost. It was worth it. Not just for the repairs, but for the principle. People asked me if I regretted painting her SUV. If I thought it was petty. You know what I said? I didn't destroy anything. I just showed people the truth. And sometimes, that's all it takes. One message. One moment. One act that holds a mirror up to someone's behavior and forces them to face it. Karen wanted to control everything, how people parked, how they decorated, how they lived. She thought the HOA gave her that power. But what it really gave her was a spotlight. And once that spotlight turned on her, there was nowhere to hide.